The phone rang at 4:40 in the morning, and a woman I had never met told me my brother's daughter had signed her paperwork on Tuesday and everything was in order. My brother has been dead since 1969. He was 19 years old when he died, and he never had a daughter. I sat on the edge of that bed with both feet flat on cold linoleum and listened to a stranger in Tulsa describe my own family to me in a calm, professional voice, the way you would read a weather report. She said the title work was finally clean. She said the other heir had been located and had executed her documents, and that once I executed mine, the company could release 41 years of suspended proceeds, and everybody could finally be paid. 41 years. I did not answer her for a good while. She thought the call had dropped. My name is Hollis Renfro, and I am 79. For 41 years I was a lease pumper in Kiefer County, Oklahoma, which means that every single morning of my working life, including Christmas, including the morning we buried my mother, I drove a loop of 12 miles of section road and gauged tanks and wrote down numbers in a pocketbook. A pumper does not guess. A pumper does not estimate. A pumper drops a steel line into a tank and reads what is actually there, and then he writes it down, and the number is the number whether he likes it or not. That is the whole job. That is nearly the whole man too, if I am honest with you. Before I go on, and there is a great deal to go on with, I want to know one small thing about wherever you happen to be sitting right now. Tell me, what is underneath you? Not the chair. Under the chair, under the floor, under all of it. Is it sand? Is it clay? Is it rock? Is it 100 feet of river bottom? Is it a parking garage? Is it something you have honestly never once thought about in your life? Put it down in the comments. I have spent my whole life caring very much about what is under people's feet, and it has been my experience that most folks have no idea, and that it almost never matters until one day it matters more than anything. Now, let me back up, because none of this makes sense until you know what my daddy did in 1961, and what he never explained to any of us. My father was Emmett Renfro. He shipped back from the Pacific the spring of 1946, married my mother inside of a year, and farmed 160 acres 4 miles east of a town called Stannard that is not on most maps anymore. In 1961, the year I turned 14, he sold that 160 acres to a fellow named Ansel Crow and moved us into town because his back was finished and there was work at the compressor station. I remember the sale because we had a pot roast the night the check cleared, and because my mother cried at the kitchen sink and then walked out and blamed it on the ragweed. What I did not know, what none of us knew, is that when my father signed that deed, he kept something back. Down at the bottom of the page, in language I would not read with my own eyes for another 64 years, he reserved an undivided 1/2 of all the oil, gas, and other minerals under those 160 acres, 80 net mineral acres. He sold the dirt. He kept half of what was under the dirt. That is a thing people used to do out here, without making a speech about it. You sold a man the plow ground, and you kept the deep part for your kids. Because everybody around here has a cousin who got rich and a cousin who got nothing, and nobody could ever tell you in advance which one you were going to be. My father was not a gambler. He was just a man who had watched a neighbor sign away everything in 1931, and had promised himself he would never sign away everything. He died in 1984, in March, at the kitchen table, with a cup of coffee cooling in front of him. And here is the part I want you to hold on to, because this is the whole hinge of the story, and it cost my family 57 years. Nobody ever probated my father's estate, not because we were crooked, and not because we were stupid, because there was nothing in it. He had a paid-off house worth about $11,000 at the time, a pickup, a shotgun, and a savings account with $360 in it. My mother was still living. There was no fight. There was nothing to fight over. A lawyer in Stannard told my mother it would cost her more to probate it than the estate was worth, and he was telling her the truth. And she went home and put the deed in a cigar box, and that was the end of it for 42 years. Nobody thought about what was under the dirt. There had not been a well on that section since 1953. It was a dry, forgotten quarter of Kiefer County, with a hole in it that had made a little oil for 8 years and then quit, until somebody drilled a horizontal well 2 miles long underneath it in the spring of last year. I want to finish telling you about that 4:40 in the morning phone call, because I did something after I hung up that I am still not sure was smart. The woman's name was Marla Sudduth. She was a division order analyst for the company operating the new well, and she had that particular voice that people get when they have delivered good news for a living long enough that they have stopped hearing how it lands. She said the name of the section and the quarter, and my stomach turned over, because I have driven past that quarter twice a week for 60 years and never once thought of it as mine. She said the heirs of Emmett Renfro had been determined. She said an affidavit had been filed of record in the county clerk's office in March. And then came the sentence that stood me up off that bed. She said, "And your brother's daughter executed her instrument on the 11th, so we're just waiting on you, Mr. Renfro." I said, "Ma'am, my brother didn't have a daughter." There was one of those pauses. Not a short one. The kind where you can hear a person deciding whether they are talking to a liar or to somebody's confused grandfather. I know that pause. I have heard it start to happen to me 2 or 3 times in the last few years. At the pharmacy counter, at the tag agency, and I have learned to slow my voice down and keep it low so it stops before it gets going. I said, "My brother's name was Dale Renfro. He was born in 1950. He was killed near Quang Tri in November of 1969. He was 19 years old, and he was not married, and he did not have any children. I am the only one left. There is nobody else." And Marla Sudith said very carefully, "Sir, I'm looking at a recorded instrument. It's signed and notarized. I got dressed in the dark. I did not turn on the lamp, because Juanita has been gone 4 years, and I still do not like the way that side of the room looks with the light on. I put on the same thing I have put on every morning of my adult life, which is a work shirt and dungarees, even though I retired in 2011 and there is not one living soul who needs me to gauge anything." And then, having no earthly idea what to do with myself at 5 o'clock in the morning, I drove out to the Ammons lease. I want to tell you about my keys first. It will only take a minute. There are 4 keys on my ring and 1 dog tag. The tag is stamped Renfro Dale E, and a service number, and a blood type, and a religious preference. And it came home in a manila envelope in December of 1969 with a folded flag and a wristwatch that did not run. They issued 2 of those tags. We got one back. I have carried it on my keys since I was 22 years old, and the letters are worn down now to where you have to know what it says to read it. And every year on the 7th of April, which was Dale's birthday, I drive out to the Ammons lease before sunup, and I gauge the tank on the number 2, well, which is the first tank my brother and I ever gauged together when we were kids, riding with a pumper named Ollie Bickham, who let us do it because he thought it was funny. And I write the date and the number in the book, and I hang that tag on the 3rd rung of the tank ladder while I do it, and then I take it back and put it in my pocket and I go home. 57 of those entries. 57 Aprils. It is not a religious thing. I could not tell you what it is. It is just the only thing I have ever been able to think of to do. So I drove out there at 5 in the morning in August with a woman in Tulsa's voice still in my ear, and I turned off the section road onto the lease road, and my headlights came up on the gate, and there was a brand new lock on it. Not my lock. Not the operator's lock either, and I would know it, because a lease gate around here carries a chain with everybody's lock on it in a daisy chain, so that any one of them opens the gate, and nobody has to ask permission. That is a courtesy, older than I am. You put your lock on. You do not take anybody else's off. Somebody had cut the chain and put on one lock. One. A shiny brass one. Still oily from the package. I sat there with my truck idling and my lights on that gate for a long time. I am 79, and I do not climb what I used to climb. But I got out and I walked the fence line about 200 yards in the dark to where I knew a low spot was, and I stepped over, and I walked up to the tank battery, and I laid my hand flat on the number 2 tank, the way a man lays a hand on a horse he has known a long time. She was warm. She was making oil. Somebody somewhere had been getting paid for a while. And a man I had not thought about in 9 or 10 years came into my head, standing right there in the dark, and would not leave. The county clerk's office in Kiefer County opens at 8. I was in the parking lot at 7:20 with a thermos. Now, if you have never been in a county clerk's land records room, I want you to picture it, because it is one of the last places in this country where the actual truth about your family is sitting on a shelf, where anybody can walk in and touch it. Big, flat books, numbered volumes. A long oak counter worn pale in 2 spots where 100 years of abstractors have leaned on their elbows. A copy machine that costs $1 a page and takes quarters like it is 1980. And a woman behind the counter who knows more about who owns what in that county than every lawyer in the courthouse put together. Hers is named Deb Prisok. She has been there 31 years. I knew her when she was a girl selling raffle tickets outside the Pentecostal church. I told her what I was looking for, and she did not ask me why, which is one of the great kindnesses of small towns. She just pulled the tract index and ran a finger down it and said, "Well, there's been some activity. There had been some activity." In March, 2 instruments had been filed against that quarter section. Deb pulled both books and laid them open on the counter side by side, and stood back and let me read them with my own eyes, which I have come to believe is the only way anybody should ever be told anything important. The first one was an affidavit of death and heirship. That is a real thing in Oklahoma, and it is used every single day, mostly honestly. When somebody dies owning minerals and there was never a probate, an affidavit like that gets recorded to say, in effect, here is who died, here is when, here is who his heirs are, and here is who owns this now. It gets sworn to in front of a notary. It gets filed in the county clerk's office. And then it sits there, and if nothing inconsistent with it shows up for 10 years, it can be relied on as marketable title. Nobody has to approve it. No judge ever looks at it. There is no hearing. It is a piece of paper that becomes the official story of your family simply because it is on file and nobody objected. I want you to hear that twice, because it is the thing I most want you to take out of this. Recording a document does not mean anybody agreed with it. Recording is not approval, it is filing. This affidavit said that Emmett Renfro died in 1984. True. It said he was survived by 3 children, Hollis Renfro, Arlene Renfro Bostick, and Dale Edward Renfro. True. And then it said that Dale Edward Renfro died in 1969, unmarried, and, in the exact language of the paper, without issue. Without issue. That is the lawyer's way of saying he left no children. It was signed and sworn by 2 men I had never heard of, who each swore he had personal knowledge of the Renfro family and its history, and it had been prepared and submitted by a land services company out of Oklahoma City. The second instrument was a mineral deed. A woman named Charla Greaves, of Chickasha, Oklahoma, had conveyed all of her right, title, and interest in the oil, gas, and other minerals under that quarter section to that same land services company. Signed, notarized, recorded. I stood there at that counter with my reading glasses pushed up on my forehead and my hands flat on 2 open books, and I understood exactly one thing and nothing else. Somewhere about 60 miles southwest of me, there was a woman I had never heard of who had signed away a third of my father's 80 mineral acres, and somebody had told her she had a right to sign them. You do not get to sign away what you do not have. Not unless somebody has already decided you are worth using. Deb Prisock watched me read it. Then she said the thing that turned my whole morning cold. She said, "You know, Hollis, you're the second one in here this month asking for that book." I asked her who the first one was. She told me she would have to look at the register. And she looked, and she turned it around, so I could see the line. And there, in blue ballpoint, in handwriting I had known since it was learning cursive at my kitchen table, was my sister Arlene's boy, Kyle Bostick. I need to explain what a suspense account is, because everything that happened to my family for 41 years happened inside of one, and almost nobody in America knows the word. When a well produces, somebody has to get paid. The company that operates it does not get to just keep the money. But before it can cut a check to you, it has to know for certain that you are the one who owns that fraction. Because if it pays the wrong person, it has to pay all over again to the right one. So its lawyers run title. And if title is not clean, if there is a dead man in the chain with no probate, if there is a name spelled 2 ways, if there is a widow nobody can find, then the company does not pay anybody at all. It puts that share into what they call suspense. Suspense. That is the actual industry word for it. Money that has been earned and is being held back because nobody can say for sure whose it is. My father's 80 net mineral acres went into suspense in 1985, 1 year after he died at that kitchen table, when a small operator reworked the old well and could not find a probate for Emmett Renfro, and there it sat. Through the 80s, through the 90s, through both of my knees, through my wife's diagnosis, through the funeral, gathering a little every year, gathering interest at a rate the state sets by statute, waiting for one single member of my family to walk into a lawyer's office and spend $400. Nobody ever did, including me, especially me. I will say that part plainly. because I do not want this to be a story about a good man and some bad people. My mother had that deed in a cigar box. I saw that cigar box 1,000 times. In 1998, I actually took it down off the closet shelf and looked at the deed and read the words, less and except all, oil, gas, and other minerals, and I thought, well, isn't that something? And I put it back on the shelf. I was 51 years old. I had a daughter in college and a transmission going out on a work truck and a wife who wanted a screened porch. Minerals under a dry quarter that had not made a barrel since Eisenhower was not a thing I had 1 minute of room for. That is how it happens. Not through villainy. Through Tuesday. I called Marla Sudduth back at 9 that morning from the parking lot of the courthouse, and I asked her to walk me through it like I was slow, which at that hour I was. She was better than she had to be. She said the operator had run title back to 1946. She said the suspended balance on the Renfro interest, with statutory interest, was $216,000 and some change. She said that when title is unmarketable through no fault of the owner, the interest runs at 12% a year in this state, which is why 41 years of a small royalty had turned into a number that made me put my forehead on the steering wheel. Then she said the new horizontal well had changed everything, because now there was real money in it. And because there was real money in it, somebody had finally done the title work that nobody had bothered to do in 4 decades. I asked her who. She said a land services company had submitted a complete curative package in the spring, the affidavit of heirship, a mineral deed from one heir, and a signature packet for the other. I asked her for the name of the landman who submitted it. There was a pause, and then some typing, and then she read it off the cover letter. Kyle Bostic, my sister's boy, 51 years old, born the summer I came back from Fort Sill. I taught him to drive a stick in the section road ditch by the sledge lease when he was 14, and he ground the gearbox so bad I had to pull over and laugh. I asked Marla one more question, and I asked it slow, because I already knew and I wanted to be wrong. I asked her whether the woman, Charlotte Greaves, had signed a division order or a deed. She said, "Well, sir, that's the thing I flagged. She signed a deed. We didn't ask for a deed. We asked for a division order. And there it is. There is the whole crime in one sentence, and it turns on a difference that maybe one American in 1,000 could explain to you. A division order is a piece of paper that tells the company where to mail your check. That is all it is. It sets out your decimal, your address, your tax number. In this state, the law says flat out that a division order does not change the terms of anything and does not convey 1 square inch of anything to anybody. You sign it and you get paid. That is its entire job. A mineral deed conveys ownership. Forever. That is its entire job too. They are both one page. They are both printed in the same 8-point type. They both come out of the same briefcase. And if a man you believe is family sets one down in front of you at your own kitchen table and says, "This just releases your name so the company can pay everybody," then you will sign it. And you will be polite while you do it. And you will offer him more coffee. I hung up with Marla Sudduth, and I sat in that parking lot, and I thought about my sister. Arlene was 2 years younger than me, and she had a laugh you could hear across a county fair. She married Don Bostic, who worked for the highway department and drank, and she raised Kyle mostly alone, and she cleaned rooms at the Starview Motel out on the highway for 26 years. She died in 2019 in a nursing home in Elk City after 4 years and 7 months of a disease that took her a piece at a time. And here is a true thing I am not proud of. In those 4 years and 7 months, I visited my sister 11 times. 11. I counted them later, which is its own kind of punishment. Juanita was sick by then too, and I had a reason for every single one of those weeks, and every reason was real, and all of them together do not add up to anything I would want read out loud at my funeral. Kyle was there. Kyle was there every week. Kyle signed the papers and took the phone calls at 2 in the morning, and stood in the hallway with the administrator explaining why the check was going to be late. I did not know until much later what that had cost him, or what it had grown into inside of him. But when I sat in that courthouse parking lot at 9:15 in the morning and read his name off a register, some part of me that is older and meaner than I like already knew that when a man carries something alone for 4 years and 7 months, he will eventually decide the world owes him, and the world will not pay. So he will go find somebody to collect it from. I drove home. I did not call him. Not yet. Because there was a woman in Chickasha, 61 miles southwest, who had signed her name to something, and before I did one single thing about Kyle Bostic, I wanted to know how, in the name of God, she had come to believe she had a right to sign it. I did not hire anybody to find Charla Greaves. I did not have to. Her address was typed on the face of the recorded deed, because that is how recorded deeds work. Anybody in America can walk into a courthouse and read your address off a document you signed. That is another thing worth knowing. I wrote her a letter, longhand, on the tablet paper I use for the grocery list, and it took me 4 tries, because the first 3 all sounded like a man about to sue somebody. What I finally sent said this: "My name is Hollis Renfro, and I live in Stannard, Oklahoma. I believe you signed a paper in March about some minerals in Kiefer County. I am not after anything, and I do not want $1 from you. I only want to ask you one question, and I would rather do it in person, but I will do it however you are comfortable. My brother's name was Dale. I put my phone number at the bottom and mailed it on a Thursday, and I did not sleep well for 6 nights. She called on a Wednesday evening at 8:15, right in the middle of the news. Her voice was younger than 56 sounds. Careful. She had clearly written down what she was going to say, and she read some of it, and about halfway through she quit reading it. She said she had been adopted in 1970 in Kansas, out of a maternity home in Wichita. Closed record, sealed. She said her adoptive parents were good people and both gone now, and that her mother had told her when she was 19 and had cried harder about it than Charla had. She said she had never looked, not seriously, not for 40 years, because she did not want to be the kind of person who went knocking on strangers' doors with a story. Then, in 2022, her daughter bought her one of those spit-in-a-tube kits for Christmas as a joke, because the whole family wanted to know if the Cherokee thing on her father's side was real. It was not. She said the results sat in her email for 11 months before she opened them. And when she did, there was a list of matches. And near the top was a man who shared enough with her to be a first cousin, Kyle Bostic. Now, I need you to understand the shape of what happened next, because it is going to make you angry. And I want you to be angry at the right thing. Kyle did not lie to her about who she was. He did not have to. He wrote to her. And he was warm, and he was funny, and he told her the truth. That her father had been a 19-year-old boy named Dale Renfro, who was killed in Vietnam 3 months before she was born. That Dale's mother had known and had been made to keep quiet about it. That there were photographs. He sent her a photograph. He drove down to Chickasha and sat in her living room for 3 hours and cried with her. 56 years old, and a man showed up and gave her a father's name and a face. And then, on the second visit, 7 weeks later, he brought a folder. He told her the family had some old mineral interest in Kiefer County. He told her the company could not pay anybody until everybody's name was cleared off the title. He told her it was almost certainly worth nothing, that these old interests never amount to anything, but that the lawyers wanted it tidy. He said, and she remembered this exactly, "This just releases your name so they can pay everybody." She signed it at her kitchen table. He notarized it himself, because a landman carries a commission. He gave her a check for $500, which he called, "for your trouble," and she tried to refuse it, and he insisted, and she put it in a drawer and never cashed it because it felt strange. "That uncashed check is going to matter later," she said. "Mr. Renfro, did I do something wrong?" And I sat in my kitchen with my hand over my eyes. If you are still here with me, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Not for my sake. I am 79 and there is nothing in it for me. Do it for whoever in your family is going to be the last one who remembers where the papers are. Because in about 20 minutes I am going to tell you the one thing that turned this whole business around. And it was not a lawyer, and it was not a judge. It was a date. 2 dates, sitting 11 days apart, on 2 pieces of paper that anybody in the world could have walked in and read for $1 a page. We met on a Saturday at a diner in Chickasha with a parking lot full of church vans, because it was the second Saturday and there was a bake sale 2 doors down. I got there 40 minutes early, which is a thing I do, and I sat in a booth by the window and watched the door, and I told myself I would know her. I did not know her. She came in and stood by the register looking around, and I looked right past her twice, because I was looking for my brother's face, and she does not have my brother's face at all. She has her mother's face, whoever her mother was. She is small and gray blonde, and she manages the cafeteria at an elementary school, and she has the forearms of a woman who has lifted a lot of hot pans. She sat down, and we did the awful polite part. Weather, traffic on 81. Whether the pie here was still any good. And then the waitress set her coffee down. and Charlotte Greaves picked up that cup with her left hand and turned it a half turn on the saucer before she drank out of it. I have not seen anybody do that since November of 1969. Dale did that. Every cup, every glass. He turned it a half turn first, always to the left, and my mother used to swat at him for it, and he could not have told you why he did it, because he did not know he was doing it. It is the kind of thing that is not in any photograph, and not in any letter, and not on any record, anywhere on this earth. It only lives in the 2 or 3 people left alive who watched a boy drink coffee at a kitchen table. I did not say anything about it. Not then. I could not have gotten it out. She had brought a photograph in a grocery sack, wrapped in a dish towel, and she slid it across the table. It was a Polaroid, gone orange the way they go. A boy in dress greens, 19 years old, standing on a concrete porch step with his cap in his hand and squinting into the sun. I knew the porch before I knew the boy. It was my mother's porch. There is a chip out of the corner of that step where I dropped a jack in 1966. Charla said her adoptive mother had been given that photograph by the maternity home in an envelope with her name on it, and had kept it in a cedar chest for 49 years, and had put it in her hand 3 days before she died. Then Charla Greaves asked me the only question that actually mattered, and I need you to know that I sat in that booth with no answer in me at all. She said, "Did he know about me?" I did not know. I did not know one thing about it. My brother left for basic in June of 1969. He was killed on the 9th of November. She was born on the 28th of January, 1970, which means that if he knew for about 4 months, in a place where a 19-year-old cannot do one single thing about it. And then he was dead. And if he did not know, then he died not knowing. And my mother carried it alone for the next 39 years and told nobody, not her husband, not her son, nobody. Both of those are unbearable in a different direction. I told her the truth. I said I did not know, and that there might be one place left in this world where the answer was, and that I had not opened it in 57 years, and that I was afraid of it. She said, "What is it?" I said, "A box." Artist Lemon has practiced law over the hardware store in the county seat for 38 years, and her waiting room has a coffee can of pencils and a fish tank with 2 fish in it, and she charges $225 an hour, and is worth 6 times that. I brought her the 2 certified copies from the county clerk, and the letter from Marla Suddeth, and my pocketbooks and a legal pad. She read for 11 minutes without saying anything, which felt like an hour. She took her glasses off. Then she told me 4 things. The first thing, that mineral deed from Charla to Kyle's company is not automatically void, but it is very likely voidable because of what he told her when she signed it. When a man says, "This just releases your name," about a document that in fact conveys everything she owns, forever, and he is the one who wrote it, and he is the one who profits by it, and he stood in a relationship of trust with her. That is fraud in the inducement, and courts have been unwinding deals like that since before the automobile. The second thing, he notarized it himself. Artist put her pen down when she got to that. A notary is supposed to be a neutral witness to the fact that the person in front of them is who they say they are. A notary who is also the buyer, on the same page, in the same room, is not neutral, and in this state that will not survive 5 minutes of scrutiny. It does not by itself void the deed, but it is the kind of thing that makes a judge sit up, and more to the point, it is the kind of thing that makes the other side's lawyer start returning calls. The third thing, this is the one that finished it. She laid the 2 certified copies side by side, the way Deb Pryzak had laid the books, and she put her finger on the notary date on the mineral deed, and then on the notary date on the affidavit of heirship. The deed from Charlotte Greaves was executed on the 11th of March. The affidavit swearing under oath that Dale Edward Renfro died without issue was executed on the 22nd of March, 11 days later, which means that on the day he had 2 men swear that my brother left no children, Kyle Bostick was carrying my brother's daughter's signature in his briefcase. It is not a mistake. It is not a misunderstanding of old family history. It is not a man doing sloppy title work in a hurry. You cannot accidentally do those 2 things in that order. He found her. He got her interest for $500, and then he swore she did not exist, so that nobody would ever come looking for her. The fourth thing Artist told me was the only one that scared me. She said, "Hollis, there's a 1992 instrument in this chain with your signature on it, and I need you to tell me what it was. I did not remember signing anything in 1992. She said the tract index showed a quit-claim deed from Hollis Renfro, a single instrument, recorded in October of 1992, and that if I had signed away my own half of my father's reservation 34 years ago for no money and no reason, then everything we had just talked about was still true and still ugly, and would still probably put Kyle in front of a district attorney, and none of it would put $1 in my pocket or 1 acre back in my family. And then I did remember, not the document, the kitchen. Arlene at my kitchen table in the fall of '92 with a manila envelope and a pen, saying the tax people needed a signature about Daddy's old place, saying it was nothing, saying Don knew a fellow who was handling it, saying it would take 1 minute, and me at the sink with my hands wet, wiping them on a dish towel, signing where she pointed, and never once reading a word of it, because she was my sister and I was in a hurry, and it was a Tuesday. 34 years later, I sat in a lawyer's office and felt the whole floor let go under me over a thing I did in 11 seconds while I was thinking about supper. Artist said, "Go get a copy of it." Not a summary. The whole instrument, both pages, certified. I said, "You can't get it?" She said, "I can. It'll cost you an hour of my time, and you'll believe it more if you go read it yourself. I want to say something to you here, and then we will get to Kyle. Every one of you watching this has signed something you did not read. Every single one. In a hospital, at a closing, at a car lot, at a kitchen table with somebody you loved standing over you saying it is nothing, and the paper does not care that you were tired. The paper does not care that she was your sister. It sits in a book in a courthouse for 100 years saying exactly what it says. I am not telling you to be suspicious of your family. That is a poison, and I have watched it eat people I cared about. I am telling you something much smaller and much easier. Go get a copy of what you already signed. That is all. You do not have to accuse anybody of anything to walk into a county clerk's office and ask what is on file under your name. It costs $1 a page. You will most likely find nothing, and you will sleep better, and it will take you one Saturday morning. I went to see Kyle before the lawyers did. Artist told me not to. I did it anyway, and I would do it again, because my sister raised that boy and she is not here to go see him herself. His land services company turned out to be a sweet number at a mail drop in a strip center in northwest Oklahoma City, between a nail salon and a place that cashes checks. He works out of his truck in a storage unit. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes working up to it, and then I called him, and he answered on the second ring and he was glad to hear from me. Nobody warns you about that with men like Kyle. He was genuinely glad to hear from me. We met at a barbecue place on Northwest Expressway. He hugged me. He asked about my knees. He told me a story about his daughter's volleyball team that was actually funny, and I laughed at it before I could stop myself. Then I laid the 2 certified copies on the table between the sauce bottles and spun them around so the print faced him, and I said, 11 days, Kyle. He looked at them for a long time. He did not pick them up. And then he did the thing I have seen weak men do at gates and lease roads and hospital doors my whole life, which is that he skipped straight over denial and went directly to the offer. He said, "Uncle Hollis, that suspense is 216,000. I'll cut you in for a third, right now, today, and nobody has to know anything about anything." I said no. He said a third, and the whole royalty on the new well, going forward. I said no again. And I did not raise my voice, because I have found in 79 years that the quietest man at a table usually ends up with the last word in it. And that is when it came out of him, and I have to tell you that this part was worse than the fraud. He said, "Where were you?" He said it flat, not shouting. He said, 4 years and 7 months. He said, "Do you know what the daily rate was at that place?" He said, $81,000, Hollis. That is what was left owing when she died. And I paid it. I am still paying it. And I sat in that hallway every Thursday and watched her not know my name, and not one person in this family came. Not one. And now there is money in the ground under Grandpa's place, and everybody's real interested in what is fair. And here is the thing. He was right about that part. Every bit of that part was true. I was one of the people who did not come. But then he said the sentence that told me exactly who I was sitting across from. He said, "She never even knew she had it. She'd never have known. She was happier before I showed up." He was talking about my brother's daughter, about a 56-year-old woman who spent 49 years not knowing her father's name and who had a photograph put into her hand 3 days before her mother died. He had found her, He had given her a father, and then he had used her as a signature, and then he had sworn she did not exist. And he had gotten so far down inside his own grievance that he genuinely believed he had done her a kindness by keeping it small. I stood up and put $4 on the table for the tea. He said, "You don't want to do this in front of a judge, Uncle Hollis. You don't know what's in that file." I said, "The 92 deed." His face did what faces do. I said, "I'm going to go read it, Kyle. Same as I'd gauge a tank. I'm not going to guess at it, and I'm not going to take your word for it, and I'm not going to take mine." The Corporation Commission had set the pooling application for hearing on the 22nd of September, which gave me 19 days. I spent the first one at the county clerk's counter with $2 in quarters. Deb Prysock pulled book 591 and set it on the counter, and I put my glasses on and read a quit claim deed I signed on a Tuesday in October of 1992 with wet hands. It ran 2 pages. Page 1 was the legal description, and my signature and the notary block. And I have to tell you that reading my own handwriting from when I was 45 years old, back when the R still had a loop in it, did something to my chest. Page 2 had 4 lines on it, and the 4th line said this: "Less and accept all oil, gas, and other minerals previously reserved, which are not conveyed hereby." Some abstractor in 1992, some careful person whose name is not on the paper, I had carried my father's reservation language forward out of a 1961 deed and typed it onto page 2 of a document nobody was ever going to read. I had signed away the surface interest I did not have in a piece of ground my father sold before I could drive. I had signed away nothing. I stood at that counter and put both hands flat on the book, and I am not embarrassed to tell you that Deb Prysock got me a folding chair. I called Artis from the parking lot and read her the 4th line, and she said one word that I will not repeat, and then she said, "Bring it to me certified, and then go home and don't do anything clever for 19 days. I did not do anything clever. I gauged. I went out to the Ammons lease at daylight, over the low spot in the fence, and I put my hand on the tank and I wrote nothing down because it was not April, and I came home. I did that 11 mornings out of 19. And on the 7th evening, I went into the back bedroom closet and I got down the box. It is a cedar box, about the size of a bread loaf, and it has Dale's tag box in it, and the folded flag, and the watch that does not run, and a stack of envelopes with a rubber band around them that has gone to dust. My mother put it together in 1969 and I inherited it in 2008, and I have opened it maybe 5 times in 18 years, and I have never once gone all the way to the bottom, because there is a smell that comes up off it that takes my knees. I went all the way to the bottom. At the bottom, under a church bulletin from the funeral and a telegram, was an envelope addressed in my brother's handwriting to my mother, postmarked from Camp Pendleton, the 14th of July, 1969. It had been opened. My mother opened it 57 years ago, and read it and put it at the bottom, and never said one word to anybody about it for the rest of her life. I am not going to read you the whole thing. Some of it is his and hers, and it is going to stay that way. But there is a part in the middle where a 19-year-old boy tells his mother that a girl named Lorraine wrote to him, and that she is going to a place in Wichita in the fall, and that her folks have made the arrangements and nobody is asking him anything. And he asks his mother to find out where the baby goes. He asks her twice. He writes, and I have this in front of me. I know I can't do nothing about it from here, but somebody ought to write down where she went so it is not just gone. He knew. He knew for 4 months, and he asked. And then he was dead on the 9th of November. And my mother did the arithmetic on a farm in 1970 in Oklahoma and made the only decision she could see, and carried it by herself until she died in 2008, without ever telling her living son that he had a niece. I sat on the floor of that closet until my legs went numb. The hearing was at 9 in the morning on the 9th floor, in Oklahoma City, in the Corporation Commission's hearing rooms, which are not in a courthouse and do not look like one. Folding chairs, a dais, a state flag on a pole with a wrinkle in it, a coffee urn on a table by the door with a paper sign asking for 50 cents on the honor system. About 30 people, most of them lawyers with rolling briefcases, waiting their turn on a docket of 11 cases. If you have never seen an oil and gas pooling hearing, it is the least dramatic room in the United States of America. An administrative law judge sits up there, and applications get called, and lawyers stand up and read exhibits into the record in a flat voice, and it goes on all morning. and the amounts of money moving across that room in an hour would buy the town I live in. Our matter was called at 9:50. The operator's attorney went first and put on his case, which took 9 minutes, and part of that case was Exhibit B, which is the ownership schedule. Every pooling application has one. It is a list of who owns what under the ground, and every name and fraction on it has to be supported by the county records. He offered it. The judge accepted it. And then the judge asked the routine question that gets asked on every single one of those applications, in the same tone you would use to ask whether anybody wants the last biscuit. He said, "Counsel, does the Exhibit B ownership schedule reflect the county records as of today's date?" And Artist Lemon stood up in the back row in a gray jacket, with a folder. She said, "Your Honor, Artist Lemon for two of the respondents. It does not, and I have certified copies for the record." She had 4 documents. She handed them up and gave a set to the operator's lawyer, and one to the lawyer for the Land Services Company, who was a young man who had clearly been handed this file that morning and told it was a routine appearance. And then she did not make a speech. This is what I want you to understand about how the truth actually comes out in this country. There was no shouting. There was no jury. She read 4 dates out loud in the flattest voice you ever heard. 1961, the reservation. The 11th of March, the mineral deed, notarized by the grantee. The 22nd of March, the affidavit swearing the grantor's father died without issue. And October of 1992, page 2, line 4. She said, "Your Honor, Respondent Greaves is the daughter of Dale Edward Renfro, and we filed a corrected affidavit and a birth record and a DNA report in the county clerk's office as of Friday. Respondent Renfro's interest was never conveyed. We'd ask that the Exhibit B not be relied upon." The judge read for about 90 seconds. Nobody in that room said anything. Somebody's phone buzzed and got silenced. Then he said, "I'm going to continue this application for 30 days. Counsel for the applicant, I'd suggest you take another look at your title opinion. Counsel for the Land Services Company." And he paused. "You'll want to look at the recording dates on pages 4 and 6 before you file anything else in this cause." That was all. 9 minutes and 40 seconds. The next application got called, and a different set of lawyers stood up and started talking about a spacing unit in Grady County. And it was over. And my family's 57 years turned around inside of a sentence that a tired man in a state office building said without ever raising his voice. Kyle was in the 3rd row. He had come with his lawyer. He did not look at me. I found him in the hallway by the vending machines. I had thought for 19 days about what I was going to say, and I did not say any of it. What I said was this: "There is a way out of this that does not end with you in front of a district attorney, and I am going to hold it open for exactly 1 week. And it is not because you deserve it. It is because Arlene sat up with me in the hospital in 1988 when my daughter had the meningitis, and nobody made her do that either. Here is the door. You sign a correction deed putting every acre back in Charla Greaves's name. You sign a written statement about what you told her when she signed and what you knew when you swore that affidavit, and it goes in the file. You surrender your notary commission, and you drive to Chickasha, and you sit in that woman's living room, and you tell her to her face what you did, and you do not cry and make her comfort you, and you do not explain about your mother, because your mother is my sister, and her debt is mine, and I will carry that part," he said. "And what do I get?" I said, "You get to still be somebody's father in about 9 years. He said, "That's not what I meant." I said, "I know it isn't." And then I said the last thing, and it is the only part of that hallway I am proud of. I told him that when the $81,000 came up in the accounting, and it would, I was going to pay it. Not because a court would make me. Because he was right on the 12th of August in a barbecue place, and a man who is right about one thing while doing a terrible thing about another is still right about the one thing, and I owed my sister 11 visits and about 4 years and 7 months. He got a hand up over his mouth and stood there in front of a vending machine and cried like a 51-year-old man cries, which is the worst kind. He signed on the 6th day. I will not pretend the rest of it was fast, because it was not. Artist probated my father's estate, 42 years late, in the district court in Kiefer County, which is where probate is done in this state, because we do not have a separate probate court. It took 5 months and cost $1,800. If somebody in my family had done it in 1985, it would have cost about $400, and none of the rest of this would have happened to anybody. The suspense account paid out in March. $216,000 and some change, split according to the law, which put a third of it in Charla Greaves' hands, and a third in mine, and a third into my sister's estate, which is to say, into the hands of the man who tried to take all of it, because that is what the law says, and I did not fight it. Kyle's share went to the nursing home in Elk City, every dollar of it, and I put in the rest. The district attorney looked at it and declined to file, which I expected, on the condition that the paper was corrected and the money was made whole. That is what usually happens. I want to be honest about that with you rather than sell you an ending where a man goes to prison. The system out here is not built to punish. It is built to fix title. Sometimes fixing the title is the only justice there is, and it turns out that is not nothing, because that paper will sit in that book, in that courthouse for the next 100 years, saying who she is. Charla and I are still working out what we are to each other. She calls on Sunday evenings. She came up in October, and we drove the whole 12-mile loop, and I showed her where her grandfather's house stood, and where the compressor station was, and where I taught her cousin to drive a stick, and she was quiet about that last one, and so was I. And on the 7th of April this year, we went out to the Ammons lease before sunup. They gave me a key to the new gate. The operator's field man handed it to me at the coffee shop and said, "Mr. Renfro, we'd just as soon you had one, and I have not decided yet whether that is the nicest thing anybody has done for me in 10 years, but it is on the list." It was 39 degrees and there was frost on the walkway on the tank battery, and the east was just starting to go gray over the Crow place. I showed her how to open the thief hatch, and how to lower the line so it does not swing, and how to bring it up and read the cut, and how you write the number down whether you like the number or not. Then I took my keys out of my pocket and I worked that dog tag off the ring, which took a while, because a split ring and 79-year-old fingers are not friends. I hung it on the third rung of the ladder the way I have every April since I was 22, and then I took it down, and I put it in her hand, and I put the ledger in her other hand, all 57 Aprils of it, and I told her that her father turned his coffee cup a half turn to the left before he drank it, every single time, and that she has done it twice in front of me, and does not know she does it. She stood there on a tank battery in the cold, holding a dead boy's name in one hand. I have turned that word over a lot since. Suspense. I looked it up finally, in the dictionary, like a fool, at 79 years old. It means being held in an uncertain condition, waiting for something to be resolved. That money sat in an account for 41 years, earning 12%, because a company could not say for certain whose it was. And a woman sat in Chickasha for 56 years, packing lunches for other people's children, because nobody in my family would say out loud whose she was. The money was always hers. She was always ours. Not one thing about either of those facts changed on the 9th floor in Oklahoma City. All that changed is that somebody finally walked into a room with the papers and said it in front of a witness. That is all justice was, in the end. Not a punishment, not a verdict, a correction to the record. So here is the one thing I am sure of after 79 years of reading what is actually in the tank, instead of what I hoped was in it. Somewhere there is a book with your family's name in it, and it says something. It might be right. It might be wrong. It might have been written by somebody who loved you, or by somebody in a hurry, or by somebody who needed you to not exist for 11 days. Nobody is going to read it to you. Go read it yourself, while you are still the one who can.